Welcome to the Cool Tools Show. I'm Mark Frauenfelder, Editor-in-Chief of Cool Tools, a website of tool recommendations written by our readers. You can find us at cool-tools.org. I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Kelly, founder of Cool Tools. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, it's great to be here.
In each episode of the Cool Tools Show, Kevin and I talk to a guest about some of his or her favorite uncommon and uncommonly good tools they think others should know about. We've got a returning guest this week, Dan Shapiro. Dan is the founder of Glowforge, the 3D laser printer. He's also the creator of Robot Turtles, the board game that teaches programming to preschoolers. He wrote Hot Seat, the CEO guidebook, and his latest hobby is throwing his wife and twin 10-year-olds in Dungeons with Dragons. More on that shortly. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I am so great, Mark. I should also add Cool Tools reader, since I was trying to buy my first 2-megapixel digital camera in 2000. Mumble.
Well, thank you. We're so glad to have you here. You have some tools for us. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So Dania, it's always so much fun talking to you because you are a maker of things, and you've got a lot of tools around. So let's get started and tell us about your first tool.
So I love cooking for the family. And my favorite cooking tool is something that my wife got me for my birthday. She went on eBay and she got a 1950 something 12-inch vintage cast iron skillet. And you say, okay, vintage cast iron, what's the fuss? And I wound up super geeking out on this. And it turns out that nowadays cast iron skillets come directly out of the cast and they have this rough bottom. So you read about cast iron being the ultimate nonstick cookware, but you've got this grating surface on the bottom of your cast iron. Mm-hmm. Modern cast iron has this, but the old stuff didn't. The old stuff, they actually ground down so it was smooth on the bottom. So you get this old, I think she paid well north of $100 for this. And, they're pretty much good forever as long as they're not warped. And it is everything. But geeking out, I wanted to figure out, is this something you could replicate today? And I found a really cheap, achievable way of doing this. Because it turns out that if you take a modern cast iron skillet and you sand it flat, which takes about half an hour, you can get almost as good as the old vintage stuff that's really hard to get a hold of. So what you do is a random orbital sander, which, side note, is my single favorite woodworking tool, but that'll be a different episode. Get a random orbital sander, put on the coarsest sandpaper that you have laying around. It's not very picky, but I think I used 40 or 60 or something like that. Ideally for metal, but you can use wood. Again, doesn't really matter. And you just sand the bottom of the pan. You go around and around until it is smooth to the touch. And then you follow any of the good how to season your cast iron skillet how-tos on the internet, and you wind up with a cast iron skillet that works like nonstick cookware, but doesn't flake carcinogens, and you can use metal spatulas in it and all that good stuff that cast iron is wonderful for, and will last another century. So I love my vintage cast iron skillet, and I cannot recommend enough that you either go fancy, get one of those, go to a garage sale, find one that way, which is a lot cheaper, or just take some sandpaper to a modern cast iron skillet. It is kitchen magic.
That is so cool. So if someone who doesn't have an orbital sander, could you just do it with like a block in sandpaper, or would it take forever?
Yes. In fact, our mutual friend Dean Putney, who also works at Glowforge, I think he did this with a block the first time he tried it and had great success. More elbow grease, takes a little time, cue up a movie and prepare to get a workout.
Let's go to work.
Yeah. But you can do it with a belt sander. You can do it with anything. It's just random orbital sanders are particularly awesome. And I think you can get them as cheap as $49.
Right. And also a lot of rental places have them. And of course, occasionally some libraries these days have tool libraries where something like that could be borrowed even.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Let's see what our friends at Harbor Freight are selling them for.
Yeah. $39.
Yeah, $31.99.
There you go.
There we go. I have a great story about how a Harbor Freight clamp failed and caused me to wind up with a bunch of stitches on my finger. My only serious woodworking injury was with a clamp. Those are supposed to be safe.
Oh, man. And it was a Harbor Freight clamp?
Yeah, it was a pipe clamp. And to be fair, I was cranking on it with a big crescent wrench, but it broke and messy.
Well, that is an awesome tip. Thank you.
So you buy a modern one, and the reason why they don't sand themselves, the manufacturer of the modern ones, is because they're just cheap, or they think that most people don't care. Or, I mean, you would think that if that was so essential, why isn't that just part of the manufacturing process, even
Wow,
for a
I
modern
don't
one?
know. I think that there's I've heard that there's some high-end modern brands that do this. Although it's surprisingly hard to pay more than 30 or 40 bucks for cast iron. I think there was a Kickstarter, I forget the name of it, that made a hexagonal shape one, and they do grind it flat. But I think it's just manufacturing cost, because for a long time cast iron skillets are just like the cheap thing that was only cheap. But it turns out they can be amazing if the surface is flat.
That's a great one. I can't wait to try that on the cast iron skillets I have. And I have an orbital sander already, so I'm good to go.
Oh, you are set.
Yes. Okay, your next tool, and this is something that I have, and not enough people know about it. I love it. The mobile passport app.
Oh yeah, I have to get the good word out. So I have to travel internationally for my job, and our family went to Asia on vacation, and every time nowadays I go through these lines, and there's the global entry, which is a big fuss, and you have to get signed up in advance, and it's good to do. It's you can get your pre-check with it and everything else, but I think you have to have your card with you,
No, you
and it
don't.
requires a
No,
lot of planning. You do
no,
you
there's
don't?
no card.
Okay, so global entry you can do without the card, but the weird thing is you're standing in line and they're like, okay, here's the forever line of chumps with paper, and here's the global entry of people who planned ahead, or you can install this app. And you think to yourself, surely this cannot be this simple. But in my experience, you can install the app. You can do it before you leave. You can do it when you touch down. You fill out everything in the app, and you can do it while you're walking to customs, and then they let you right through. It is the shortest line. It's shorter than global entry, which you have to pay for. Every experience I've had.
I love it. I've used it probably a dozen times now, and there is no line. I think maybe are we ruining it, Dan, by talking about
Let's edit this part out. What have I done?
it?
This is a terrible mistake.
So the way it works is that you have an app, and is it that anybody can use it? There's no vetting, and you just fill out the kind of information you would fill out on those custom forms when you normally arrive on paper. Is that the same thing?
That's the idea. And I've had friends who are not US citizens who used it successfully. So
Wow.
I think it's the intersection of it's streamlined and quick because you can enter all the data there, and people don't know about it, just makes it really fast.
As I recall, the way you use it is you have the app, it gives you a QR code, you go to a machine, it spits out a little piece of paper, and then that's what you show the border guy and the customs guy, and that's it.
It's very much like global entry because you go to the machine and it scans your passport. Does it scan your? Do you have to scan your passport too at the machine?
You scan your passport with the app,
Yeah,
and it bundles it
you
up into
do.
the package.
Oh, I see. Okay, so well, that's it. So it may even be faster than global entry.
And the line appears to be shorter every time I've gone through it.
Yeah, it's so good. That's a great one.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
And bonus tip: if you are on the what do you call it, the TSA pre-check, it expires after 5 years, and they are not good at notifying you. The best way
Oh,
they have to notify you is randomly rejecting you with no explanation of why. And after that happens a couple times, you start to get suspicious. So if you were one of the first, year or two of people in pre-check, now is the time to renew that.
that's a good tip because I have pre-check and it probably has been close to 5 years now.
They have a new website, and once you sort of port over to the new website, they'll tell you. But if you were one of the first year or two of people, then your data is all on the old website, and until you port it over, they don't really tell you.
Right. If you're with global entry, you also get pre-check. That's a 5-year renewal, but they do notify you because I just renewed. That's not the same as pre-check. That's global entry, but it includes pre-check.
So did you do your renewal, Dan?
I did, only after I think I tweeted about randomly getting bounced at the border, and a reporter from USA Today called me up, and so there's public complaining about the pre-check notification process now in USA Today because it was such an unpleasant surprise. So warn your listeners so they're not caught as well.
That's good. So When you did your renewal, do you have to go back into an office and do all that again, or can you just do it all on the website?
I did not. I went and connected to their new website and paid the fee again, and
Oh,
all
that's
was golden.
great. Nice. So you just have to go in once the first time.
That was my experience.
Okay.
I'm careful there because I know they divide people into categories, and that I am crazy privileged in being in the low risk categories, and things tend to go more smoothly. But yeah, it was really just online for me.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. Okay, so the next tool, your kids are of the age, and you are playing Dungeons and Dragons with them. So tell us about how you're making that happen.
And because this is about a tool, I'm just going to focus in on one particular thing, which is that for those who may have touched Dungeons and Dragons at some point in their life, Wizards of the Coast released a new version, a new set of rules that they call 5e, the 5th edition. They're widely regarded as one of the most friendly and approachable versions. And like they've done since the start, they released a starter kit. And you may remember Dungeons and Dragons as, pile book upon book, each one at $40 or $50, and studying and writing and all this. But they did an amazing job with the starter kit because they put together everything you need for a group of 3 to 8 people to play probably 20 to 40 hours, if you really stretch it out, of wonderful game time in a box for $20. And that's not $20 a person. That's $20. And if you're creative with a dice rolling app, you are good to go.
And it says that right now on Dungeons and Dragons, it's only $13.
Yeah, on Amazon.
Oh my gosh. It's a steal. It's like they're paying you to play. So I'd had fond memories of this. And this actually started when a friend of mine invited my kids over to play. And he led them through an experience. They said, "Hey, Dad, can our family play?" So I got the starter kit, and it was really amazing. My wife, who didn't grow up with it at all, was a little skeptical at first, and then was like, "Oh my gosh, we're spending 4 hours at the table with our kids talking to each other. This is amazing." The kids got excited about reading. They got excited about writing character backstories. They started calculating average dice rolls and doing a bunch of math, and all this without any, shine of this being work or school related. And they were just diving into it with great joy. And ever since we started with the starter set, we've been playing probably at least every other week, oftentimes every week, and for 4 hours at a go of our family sitting at a table together, eating snacks because that's obligatory, and telling each other stories because that's what the game's really about. And it has just been magical.
So what actually comes in this box?
So they put together a couple of things in the okay, now it gets a little confusing. They have a starter kit, and they just released as a Target exclusive something that I think they call the Essentials Kit. I'm talking about the starter kit. The starter kit is 2 books, one that's read by the dungeon master, who's sort of the head storyteller and who guides the story, and one that is read by everybody. Or, as is often the case, that's also read by the dungeon master, who just sort of tells people what they need to know as they play. So depending on your audience. It comes with a set of dice, and it comes with some character sheets. And besides a pencil and either extra dice or a dice rolling app, that's really all you need. What's really elegant, though, is that they did a great job of laying out the content. So you could take somebody who's very inexperienced, and whether, experienced a dungeon master or a player or anything else, and get them up to speed without this sort of daunting, read this volume first approach of the full game. And the adventure is really good. It's really engaging. It really pulls people in. It's got great characters. It's got great storytelling. It holds the dungeon master's hand so they can just, kind of read sections out loud, but also has tons of places for for them to improvise and make things up if that's the way they want to go. So it's a really great set of training wheels, but it's also a wonderful adventure for just about anybody. And it's been widely reviewed as one of the best. The other one, the Essentials Kit, is now, as I understand, available at Target for $20. And I think it adds a screen which is an essential part of the experience. It surrounds the dungeon master's secret plans, and it's sort of a multifold panel that has critical information on the back, and supposedly is also a great adventure. But I have not had the experience with that one.
So the Dungeons Master Guide, do you think it would work for someone who's never been a DM before? Is it enough to make them feel confident to kind of lead the game?
That's where they really nailed it. They took a trimmed down section of the rules, because you can still buy the 300-page tomes, the player book and the DM's book. And each one of them is.
We've got all of those. They're daunting.
Yes, they de-dauntified it. That was the magic. They gave you something that you can read in an hour or two and be ready to go. So I'd put it as if you've ever sat down with a game that has somewhat more complex rules, like I'm thinking something like Settlers of Catan. Not that complicated. Oh, it's more than that. But up one or two steps in like a strategy board game where you sit down, it takes you a little while to get it, and then you get it and you move forward. It's kind of that level. You have to commit an hour or two to wrapping your head around it, but it's got everything you need to move forward from there without having to commit to it as a hobby before you even get started.
Mm-hmm. That's really important. That sounds so cool. So, as a segue from this Dungeons and Dragons starter set and the important screen that DM needs to kind of keep some of the secret stuff away from the players.
Wait. What's the screen? I don't know about the screen.
So this isn't a screen like your phone screen. This is a screen like a piece of material that sits on the counter, so that when you roll the dice and you roll something that means a terrible thing just happened to the players, you can look up with an evil smile and just pause and stretch it out for a minute. And they say, "What happened? What happened?" And you can say, "Well, it's not pretty." So
wait. So the idea is that the roll of dice is not public. It's only for the player to see.
It gives you the choice where the dungeon master can roll privately or publicly, and it lets you put all your notes that say things like, and then they are surprised by an ogre behind the screen, so that people don't see all the shenanigans that are going on under the curtain to tell the story.
So every player has a screen in front of them?
No, just the dungeon master.
Oh, just the dungeon master.
And so the dungeon master can hide his or her like maps and notes and all that kind of stuff, all the private information that the kind of the script that they don't want anyone to see in advance.
Okay.
Because for those unfamiliar, Dungeons and Dragons is a game where the dungeon master has a sort of a loose outline of a story, tells part of the story. The players say what they do, and then the dungeon master will share a different part or just make something up if the players are sufficiently creative in order to handle that. But you've got to keep your story notes private because you don't want to ruin the surprise.
So all that material that the dungeon master is orchestrating with is behind a screen of some sort.
It is like the Wizard of Oz, and you don't want to look behind the curtain.
Right. And so normally, what's the screen made out of?
Traditionally, either file folders and duct tape, or you buy one for $10 or $20.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But
or you can make your own.
Indeed. And this weekend, I decided I was done with file folders and duct tape, and it was time to get real. So I started Googling for DIY Dungeon Master screens and dungeon doors, because I like that as a point of inspiration. And I cooked up a custom Dungeon Master screen that I'm just so excited about. I'll put some pictures in the show notes, but it looks like 3 dungeon doors that are banded on the top and bottom and riveted, and with these what looks like iron hinges. But the whole thing, I basically started Saturday morning doodling and had 4 hours, and the kids were running around, and used my Glowforge to go print this thing out of wood and leather and veneer. And then to top it off, I took some drawings of the kids' characters and engraved them on each panel. And last but not least, used magnets so I could print out all the notes I wanted and stick them to the back of it and have all the notes right there at hand. And it just looks, if I may say so, amazing. And to go from start to finish in 4 hours and have this thing that it was just really a lot of fun. And the kids, when I showed it to them, were over the moon excited.
So you said you used the Glowforge, which is something that you make. Tell us about a Glowforge.
What ho, tool number 4. Yes.
Yes.
So the Glowforge 3D laser printer is something that, founded the company now, 4.5, almost 5 years ago. Did a crowdfunding campaign, but now we've actually been shipping them for a couple of years. We got people building businesses on them. We've got people building their woodworking hobbies and fundraisers around them. We've got schools who are using them for prototyping and for art class and for engineering and for STEM. And it is basically a desktop CNC laser cutter engraver that can engrave and cut and sculpt surfaces with a ton of precision, pretty fast. It's really easy to use.
And what's the biggest size that would just give us a sense of how big or small this is?
So it fits on a desktop. It's about the size of, think about a bag you'd check. So it's like 38 inches wide, and I don't remember how deep. I want to say 18, 20 inches deep. And you can cut 18 by 10 and a half inches. So for this DM screen, I actually took a big piece of plywood. I used the Glowforge Pro, which lets you use oversized materials. So you stick one end of the plywood in, print on it, push it through, print some more. I used a Glowforge Pro so I could print all 3 panels out of a giant piece of plywood and have the grain run nicely across the whole thing. Because as I used to be a woodworker, I'm picky about that sort of stuff. And put the whole thing together. It took about 2 hours of printing time.
And can you print inside, or because of fumes, do you have to print outside or have to duct this?
Yeah, I have it in the basement. There's no ventilation. We have a product called the Compact Filter, which sits underneath the Glowforge. Glowforge starts at $2,500, and you can connect it to a window, or you can put it in the basement like me and put in a Compact Filter, which is another $995. And that does all the filtering, so you can run it anywhere with Wi-Fi and a power plug.
So I have a Glowforge and have really been having a lot of fun making things with it. One thing that I made was a retro video game arcade player, and the basis is a Raspberry Pi, and then it has a 10-inch flat screen HDMI monitor that I bought on AliExpress. And I think I probably have like 6,000 or 7,000 games loaded on it. And it's got like a joystick controllers and buttons. I'll put some pictures. And then this weekend, I used the Glowforge to make a birthday present for my daughter. And it's just a wooden box, and it has 2 buttons and a knob on it. And it's got a Raspberry Pi inside that has, I think, 600 cassette tape recordings from the 80s and 90s of experimental music. And so, it's got a battery in it. And so you turn it on with one button, and then the other button just picks a random cassette to play. And then it's got a volume knob, and that's all it does. It just plays it. You don't know what song is playing or anything. It's completely random. But I am just so happy with the way it turned out. It's really cool looking. And I have like hexagonal shaped sound holes on it, a little pattern that I made. It's so much fun having this Glowforge because you don't have to worry about like having the right size drill. Making weird shaped holes are easy. There's all kinds of like interesting joinery methods that people have come up to make 3D shapes out of the thing. It's like, I've kind of decided that anything that I make with a 3D printer should be hidden underneath something that's made with a laser printer.
So I don't have a Glowforge, and I'm just curious about some of the minimum. If you took kind of your starter version, the cheapest one, what kinds of things could it cut? Like you were mentioning plywood. Well, what thickness plywood would be the maximum, and could you cut metal, or what kind of metal can you cut? Could you answer a couple of those questions?
Yeah. So with the basic model, you can cut plywood up to and wood up to 1/4 inch thick officially. Unofficially, we have customers who are cutting 1/2 inch oak and plywood and all sorts of crazy stuff, which people are wildly creative with this. It's slow going.
What's the difference between unofficial and official? I mean, you guarantee they can cut 1/4 inch, but you can probably cut a 1/2 inch?
Yeah, we sell a line of materials that are up to 1/4 inch thick. And those are 100% guaranteed that'll print perfectly every time. But folks will go and go to Home Depot and grab all sorts of stuff. And then it depends on the composition of the material, because plywood uses different glues and different species. So a half an inch, you've got to find just the right material. And we've got a forum where people share left and right all sorts of tips for doing this.
So that's plywood. What about metal?
Metal you can engrave. Also glass and iPhones. You can engrave but not cut. So metal, glass, and stone all engrave really beautifully, but not cut. Then you can cut things like paper and cardboard, fabric, chocolate, really thin chocolate you can cut, thick chocolate.
Can you cut acrylic?
Acrylic cuts beautifully. You get a beautiful sort of laser cut edge that's already finished and ready to go. And then crazy stuff like people would pick up leaves and cut cityscapes on them. Pretty much anything organic, any organic material.
So leather, you can cut leather?
Yeah, my wallet I made on the Glowforge like a year and a half ago, and it's been through the ocean and it's been all over the place. I have a shoulder bag.
Yeah, leather works great.
Yeah. In fact,
it cuts like the stitching holes and everything. I've seen beautiful things like shoes, purses.
And is to input the pattern, the file, I assume you regular CAD kind of programs would work, tinkering with. But do you also have a catalog of like Thingiverse where you can actually download other people's patterns?
So yes, there's a catalog, although we have not yet started accepting other people's catalogs. It's high on our team's wish list. Other people's submissions. Right now, it's just a small curated set that we have. So coming soon. There's a ton of free designs online, including on Thingiverse. In fact, if you go back to the very first items uploaded in Thingiverse, they're for lasers, because Bree and the group at, I think it was Resistor, NYC Resistor, had a laser that they were using to make the first MakerBots. So there's a bunch of laser stuff there. But to your question about the software, what's great is you can use CAD, but you don't have to. A lot of our customers are artists or designers or just tinkerers. And you can use Adobe Illustrator, you can use Inkscape, you can use Photoshop. We have customers using PowerPoint. We have customers using Microsoft Word. Yeah, in fact, if you go, Joann fabric stores are starting to roll out Glowforge units that are available for rent. And on site, they're using Microsoft PowerPoint as type in some text, plop down a shape, and go. You're off to the races.
Wow.
If you can PDF it, if you can JPEG it, if you can turn it into an SVG, then you are good to go.
And also, can't you also just draw on the material and the camera in the Glowforge will look at it and make the cut and engraving lines?
Yeah, I mean, this is where you get preschoolers fired up about making stuff, because it can literally take their drawing and turn it directly into a finished product. And so it can take drawings, scans, lines. If you want to cut a board in half, you can draw a line on it, click the line, and now your laser's a saw. Draw a circle, and now your laser's a drill.
Wow, cool.
It's so cool.
And so the how many different models do you have, and what's the difference?
The basic model at $2,500 does all sorts of amazing stuff you can see on our website, or actually the best way, so you're not taking our word for it, is go to Instagram and look at the Glowforge hashtag, and you'll see what random people are tagging with Glowforge. Then the Plus uses a more powerful laser, and so it can cut up to about 20% faster, upgraded optics, and a double warranty, 12 months instead of 6. The Pro, our top-end model, has everything that the Plus does, but it also has that pass-through that lets you print on truly enormous material, and it comes with upgraded cooling. So for our customers who found that they can actually earn a living at this, or make a great side gig out of it, that are printing all day long, they'll use the Pro, because the Basic and Plus, after a couple hours, if the room is warm, will pause to cool and then just pick up where they left off. Whereas the Pro, with the solid state cooling unit, can go nonstop at room temperature.
Interesting. Dan, where can people go to find out more about everything that you're working on?
Well, everything is probably my Twitter account, twitter.com/Dan Shapiro. For Glowforge, they can go to glowforge.com and see the full line of products there. And I'll include some links that we can put in the show notes and some pictures so people can see the DM screen. They can see my take on your controller, because I got really excited and I made a giant controller for 2 people with no screen and like a leather surface, so that we could play with that on the TV. because, one great idea leads to another one.
Cool.
And some of the other, and links for cast iron skillets and all that good stuff too.
That sounds amazing. Very cool. Well, Dan, this has been a blast as usual.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a treat to be a part of a show that I have been an admirer of and consumer of for so very long.